I have to do some synoptic parallels where I compare Mark to Matthew to Luke. And I wanted to know if I can do this on Accordance. So I have Accordance Bible software. I think I have version 13, but this will work and be included with anyone that has version 9 or higher. I found out that there is a module that has Kurt Allen's synoptic parallels in it. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to open that module for the passage you want. And then I'll show you how I set up my color highlighting set for this, because I have to highlight the passages in a various color-coded scheme for my assignments. And then I will show you my analysis of just a couple verses in Mark chapter 2. The passage I'm doing for this week is this one on the screen right now, healing and forgiving a paralytic. So how would you open the gospel synopsis of this? That's the question. So the way that I found to do this, maybe there's a better way. I did this yesterday and it worked. Let's just try one verse instead of all those verses. Amplify, parallels, and you have your pick here of a couple of 3 different ones, Huck and Leitzman, or Robertson, or Allen. And I'm using Allen, so I'll click that. And what it brings up for me, now this is too much, so I'm going to get rid of these windows or minimize them over here. What it gives to me is the ones that Allen has marked pericope 43, healing of the paralytic. So in the middle I have Mark 2, 1 through 12, and on the left I have Matthew 9, on the right I have Luke 15. So that's the way that I open the parallels, is I go to Mark, I go to the verse I want, I select it, and then open a new tab. I'm actually just going to completely exit out of the original, and that shouldn't do anything to this. Okay, so now we have this screen. I am going to make the font size quite a bit bigger for all of these because I'm really going verse by verse here. I'm not really sort of zooming out to the whole passage until I've done the highlighting work. Okay, so that's the first step, is getting the screen to display like this. The next step is making a highlight pack. To do this, you go to Highlight, and it brings up my highlights. Now, I've already done this, so I can just show you really quickly what it's going to look like. So I set it up so that, and I believe this is using Mark Goodacre. I think this is Mark Goodacre's color scheme. So we've got Matthew, Mark, and Luke as the primary colors, and then the combos of Matthew and Mark and Luke, and Matthew and Luke are the color combos on the color wheel. So red plus blue makes purple, red plus yellow makes orange, and yellow and blue make green. So I do that so that the color scheme makes intuitive sense, and they're not just random, seemingly random colors. So how do you make this? Well, you have, let's just say I'm back to ground zero here. What I would do is I would go to the gear, and then new highlight file, and we're going to name it something. I'll delete this after I'm done with this, so it doesn't matter. Let's call it Synoptic Parallels 2. Okay. And so the first one, I'm going to type Mark, and I want Mark to be red, and that's it. So now I have my Mark one. And then I'm going to click New. I want Matthew to be, what did I have Matthew as? Blue. Good. I mean, if I wanted to, I could play around with these settings visually, but it doesn't really matter. Luke. Make Luke yellow. Mark Matt is, let's see, red and blue makes purple. I'm just clicking new after each of these. You don't have to click OK and then click new because that'll get you out of the window altogether. That's not what you want. So Mark Luke is what? Red and yellow makes orange. And one more. Mark Luke. And Mark Luke is red. But I just did that. Matthew Luke is blue and yellow, which makes green. So now I click OK. And now I have a folder called Synoptic Parallels that's going to just have these 6 options here for color coding. Now, if I want to, I can turn that off and just go back to normal. This is where I might save my important things if I'm just generically highlighting, or have this other pack, or I have the one I made for this assignment. So that's how you would make the highlighting pack, and it's important that you get that set up correctly. You can't really do this assignment unless you have it done correctly. So the next thing I'm going to show you is how to use this to make highlights. First of all, this box is right over the top of our screen, which is somewhat annoying. Okay. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to go through and see how my cursor is a highlighter right now. That is, you can use that, but I had a lot of problems with the user interface with that, where it would like double highlight over and erase things I didn't want to when I hovered the eraser over it without clicking. And so I recommend not doing that. Instead, just get out of the highlighter. And what you're going to do is you're going to highlight, and now this annoying box pops up, but you can click away from it. And then you're going to click the color palette and then click the one you want it to be. Right. So instead of using the direct cursor to highlight feature, you should just do the select and then make it a highlight. Now I don't even read this to see if that actually is what I want. Well, I didn't mean to highlight that. So let's, right here, between the most 3 recently colors used and the color palette, there's an eraser. Let's use that. So now what I want to do is try to figure out how these synoptic passages line up with one another. So the first thing that stands out to me is that Mark names where he's going as Capernaum. Luke doesn't have any place name, although it says sitting nearby. I wonder if in the section above Luke has named where Jesus is at. But either way, since we're going for a pretty, let's say, literal rendering of the synoptic parallels, here we have in Mark, after getting into a boat, he crossed the other side, that would be of the Sea of Galilee, and came to his own town. I don't think that Mark names Capernaum as Jesus' own town, but Matthew does. So that's interesting. So actually two things are different here. We have this phrase, now after some days, the introductory phrase of the section, and this one is after getting into a boat. And then in the Luke passage, we have now on one of those days, while he was teaching. It looks like the Luke passage here is actually like setting up the fact that there's Pharisees before you get down to the later part of the passage, because here there's going to be Pharisees. Why is this man? Oh, experts in the law here is what Mark has. We can highlight that later. So let's just do this one. Capernaum, the name of the place, is not found in the other 2. So let's highlight it with Mark only, so red. Okay? And then his own town, that is unique to Matthew. So let's highlight that in blue for Matthew only. And then Luke doesn't seem to have a place name to highlight at all. So we'll just leave that blank. Okay? Let's go down to Jesus perceiving their thoughts. Verse 8 in Mark 2, now immediately when Jesus realized in his spirit that they were contemplating such thoughts, he said to them. The parallel in Matthew over here is, when Jesus perceived their thoughts, he said. And let's see. When Jesus perceived their hostile thoughts. Interesting. Number one, the difference here is that Mark has experts in the law. Let's see, what is it? Grammateus. Okay, so like scribes. In Matthew, it says experts in the law, which is grammateus. Okay, so that's exactly the same. And who is the there of this passage? Experts in the law, so grammateus and the Pharisees. That is going to be interesting. We're gonna for sure mark this. So this and the Pharisees is something that only Luke has there, but then experts in the law, or grammateus, is shared between all three, so I'm not going to mark that. But then about the actual the perception verse here, Jesus realized in his spirit that they were contemplating such thoughts. Jesus perceived their thoughts. So, okay, just a note here. It is somewhat annoying that this synoptic feature doesn't offer to have the Greek as the text that I'm comparing. It only has the English, so you have to scroll over to get to the Greek. And if you really need to look at the a wider section of text, you might need to open a new tab here and then go to that passage. So why do you respond with when Jesus perceived their thoughts? So we have Jesus, Edo, Autos, and Thumesis, and then Lego. So, okay. Now Mark has his immediately. Mark is always saying immediately all the time. Euthus. So immediately, Jesus, epigenosko. That's a different verb. Epigenosko is a different verb than this perceived, Ido, which is just see. Realized in his spirit, autos pneuma. That is not in the other one. That they were contemplating, dialogizomai, it's like the word for dialogue, such thoughts. Footnote, thus they were reasoning. So this such thoughts is not really in the Greek, so don't worry about that. They were reasoning within themselves. And then here we have they began to think to themselves. And there's also, according to the footnote, there's a legontes in here saying. Oh, look at this. So Luke actually includes the content of the thoughts that they're saying, well, whereas Mark had it as direct speech that they say. So let's make some decisions here. Let's make some highlights. So this immediately is a Mark only. This word perceived is a Matthew only. The perceived here is epigenosko, and the realized here is epigenosko. So this is actually shared between Mark and Luke. So that's going to go in orange. Jesus perceived. And see here, it shows me my 3 most recently used colors, which is very helpful for the shared ones, because then you don't have to go back and open it up again. Perceived. Now, this hostile thoughts, where is hostile coming from? I think that might be an English translation decision for rendering dialogizomai here. It says in the text footnote here that it's just reasonings. They began to reason with themselves. Let's see. On the hostile or evil nature of these thoughts, see G. Schrenk, Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, 297. Without reading that, I probably would not put the word hostile in here for dialogizomai. But this is dialogizomai. This is dialogizomai. And this word for thoughts is enthumesis. Okay, so again here we have a uniquely Matthew word, but then this word for contemplating such thoughts is again shared between. It is annoying that these little boxes pop up once you highlight something. There. Okay. Now I'll also notice that in his spirit here is not found in the other sections. So that's going to be red is Mark only. There we go. Why are you thinking such things in your hearts? Why are you raising objections within yourself? And what is this one? Why do you respond with evil in your hearts? What is this? Why tis dialogizomai en su. Okay, and this is why are you thinking tis dialogizomai autos cardia. And this one here is inatai euthuomai, which I think is the same word that it's the same root that this was here. So Matthew's being consistent within himself. With evil, poneros, okay, so that is unique. This is unique, and in your hearts is shared with Mark. So why do you respond? We're going to color the respond in blue, and we're going to color the with evil in blue for Matthew. And then in your hearts, we're going to say is shared with Mark, which is Matthew and Mark is purple. And then here, the in your hearts at the end here is coming from, it's the same as in Matthew. But then the rest of this, why are you thinking such things in your hearts? Why are you raising objections? But it's the same underlying English, or same underlying Greek. But here it has the has a pronoun in front of in your hearts. Within yourselves is en su. But why are you raising objections? This is the same. So we're going to call this Mark and Luke. And why are you thinking this? We'll call this Mark and Luke. The pronoun here, the autes, is unique to Mark. And then the within yourselves is unique to Luke, which is yellow. I didn't get to use the green in this, but that's okay. So the reason why you would do this kind of very slow, almost pedantic comparison exercise is because then at the end you can read through and try to discern which one of these is the closest to the original, which passage of these three best explains textual features of the other passages. So like I'm noticing right away that just at least in this verse that we looked at, we have Matthew has four unique, or I guess these aren't unique, so three unique additions and one thing that is shared with Mark. Meanwhile, Mark and Luke are sharing quite a bit here, and there was nothing, at least in this verse, that was unique to Matthew and Luke. So these kinds of points of observation are important for figuring out the synoptic problem, which, of course, you can't do using just one verse or one passage. You have to do this for all of the synoptics and try to discern a pattern and then try to find ways. And there really is no way. There's not one good model that explains all of the textual data, which is why it's an intractable problem in New Testament studies that's been going on for hundreds of years. But it does help you to notice when one of the writers is making intentional changes, and especially if you notice that all the changes that they're making start to line up in the same direction. So, for example, here we have this other word, which I might need to do a word study on to understand what it means a little better, but it's being translated as thoughts and responding instead of this word for like dialoguing, which I know doesn't just mean dialogue. But then we have perceived or know, and then we have with evil here. Those are all really interesting changes. I mean, again, it's too quick to say, oh, Matthew is intellectualizing this problem that is spiritual in the other passages, right? Like you could even say that maybe Matthew deleted in his spirit, but then kept in your hearts. I don't know. I haven't spent any time with this passage at all besides right now in front of you doing it. But that is how you can start to do the gospel parallels. Now I'll show you, this is automatically saved. You don't need to click save on this. And you can open back up your highlight folder by pressing the highlight button up here, Synoptic Comparisons, and then you can just make it go away if you want. And then you can bring it back. Let me show you this. This is the one I did for my assignment last week. I had to do the baptism scene of Jesus. And so here you can see a complete version. I think I used every color. Let's see, blue, purple, green. There should only be 3 possible colors for each one. Red, orange, purple. Yeah. So here it's interesting that the word opened is the only shared feature of these 2 passages. Mark uses the word schizo for this, but then Matthew and Luke both use anoigo, which is a little less evocative. And this actually is a significant point in the Gospel of Mark because later Mark uses the word again for the curtain tearing in 2. So this may indicate that Matthew and Luke are drawing on a tradition that's actually a little bit earlier than Mark's own text. Meanwhile, Matthew has all this stuff added. And Luke starts out a little blunter. Now, when all the people were baptized, Jesus was also baptized. Luke doesn't even mention John in this. So my suspicion from working on this passage last week was that actually Luke might be the more original of these, which is concerning as someone who believes in market priority. So, but again, you can't be that quick. You have to mentally file all this data, and then try to make wider comparisons based on whole sections of the gospel synoptic comparisons, not just individual verses. Okay, I think that just about does it for this video. Is there anything else I want to show you? So yeah, you can exit out of this and then come back into it and it'll be saved because your highlight folder automatically saves it. I don't know of a good way to export this like into a Word document. So what I did was I just took a screenshot of this with the text a little smaller here so that it would all fit on one screen. And then I submitted that for my assignment. Thank you for watching, and that is the end of this video.